What's up everyone, how's it going? It is Mr. M. Welcome back to my channel. Hope you all have had a good Christmas if you celebrate it. If not, hope it's been a good holiday for you anyways, filled with loads of good people, good food and drinks, and just an overall great time. This is going to be part 1 to my year-end list. I'm going to be doing a top 20. This will be numbers 20 through 11. I decided not to do a top EP 7 inches demos just because there wasn't really that many that I enjoyed. Now, I don't really care about the amount of releases or the length of the video. I just didn't feel like only doing a 5 or 6 minute video, which is what it would have been doing, what it would have done, especially since a couple of them I've already talked about in previous videos. And one of the ones that would have been in that video is going to be in this video. And any of the other ones that I enjoyed, I'll just talk about in the future. But yeah, this will be numbers 20 through 11. Like I said, there isn't really any order to this video. When I get to my top 10, there's going to be an obvious order of which album is my favorite, going from 1 to 10. But this one, I like all these records. I just didn't really feel like putting them in my favorites to least favorite of these 10. There is an order that I wrote them in that just made sense to me to how I'm going to show them in this video. But number 11 isn't necessarily better than number 20. You know, what I show towards the end of this video isn't necessarily better than what's shown at the beginning of the video. They're all good, and if you feel intrigued by any of them, there's going to be links in the description for these releases. So if you want to check them out, you can. And with that, let's get rolling. First up, Tomb Mold. This is Planetary Clairvoyance, put out on 20 bucks spin. One of a few 20 buck spin releases you're going to see on my list. Holy shit, the work ethic of this band. This is their third album in 3 years, their second on 20 bucks spin. And it's not shit material either. They're not pumping out a record just to put out a record. You know, these are actual good records, you know, filled with loads of great riffs. The production on it is so good. There's still a lot of hype surrounding this band, so I know a lot of people are still turned off. But if you like good death metal, don't sleep on Tomb Mold. Now, it hasn't been confirmed if they're going to put out another record next year or if they're going to wait a little bit. But Planetary Clairvoyance is still another solid addition to their discography. I don't like it more than their previous record, Manner of Infinite Forms, but it is still a solid record worth checking out nonetheless. Next up, we have Macro by Ginger. This one came with an alternate album cover. This is what their actual album cover looks like, this looks better to me than what's on this LP. But Ginger is from Ukraine. This was put out on Napalm Records. Ginger plays like progressive extreme metal with some R&B elements mixed into it. Think Arch Enemy, but heavier than anything Arch Enemy has ever done, and with some clean singing thrown in there as well. And the way that their singer goes from those throat shredding screams through some absolutely beautiful singing. Now, it's not just something that she does on record. I've seen them live a couple times, and anyone else who's seen them live can attest to the fact that she does that shit in real life. No, she is so goddamn good. And the way that the music flows, you know, she just complements the music. And I feel like Ginger is kind of underrated because I don't ever see anyone talking about them. But if you look at their numbers on like YouTube and social media, you can definitely see that they're getting the attention that they deserve. But since I don't see anyone talking about them, I'm going to consider them an underrated band and definitely give them a listen for sure. Next up is Possessed with Revelation of Oblivion. Holy shit. Who knew after 33 years that Possessed was going to put out a record this good? Who knew if Possessed was ever going to put out a record again? You know, this is some more death thrash stuff, which to me, that's how they've sounded their entire career. You know, Seven Churches, The Eyes of Horror, all the way up till now. They've never been a straight up death metal band, at least in my opinion. But every single song on here is so good. You know, Ritual, Shadow Cult, Abandoned, Dominion. You know, every single song here is just so good, and it took me a little bit to get used to Jeff Becerra's vocal style, but he is in a wheelchair, and so it's more difficult for him to sing sometimes. And on some songs, he sounds better than some vocalists who have the ability to control their full body and aren't confined to a wheelchair. So if you've had second thoughts about Possessed just because you don't want them to sound different than how they've sounded in the past, just set those doubts aside and listen to this record. Obviously, it's not going to sound exactly like Seven Churches or The Eyes of Horror, but it is still a solid death thrash record. And, you know, like I said, who knew Possessed was even going to put out a new record, you know, and let alone one this good. Next up, this is Avril Lavigne with Head Above Water. And if you see my channel, you know I listen to all sorts of music, and I was not going to make a top 20 that was specifically predicated on metal. And so this is the first of a few non-metal albums that are going to be on this year-end list as well. And while compared to the rest of her discography, this is by no means even in her top 3, this is still a very solid record, especially considering that no one knew if she was ever going to be able to make music again, because she had Lyme disease and she was stuck in bed for a couple of years. But compared to her previous stuff, this is much more chilled, much more laid back. It's a lot more instrumental too. On her last couple of records, she was leaning very more on like an EDM style, especially on her last self-titled record. But this one, every song is real instruments. A lot of the songs are based off her struggle with Lyme disease. There are a couple of songs that are kind of a callback to her older style, with parts of the song Bigger Wow and then Dumb Blonde. That entire song is like a callback to some of the more punk moments in her last couple of albums. But even though I don't think this is as good as most of her stuff that she's done, this is still a very solid record. I'm very happy to see that she is still going to be making music even after her battle with Lyme disease. Next up, from 20 Bucks Spin, this monster of a record, Superstition, The Anatomy of Unholy Transformation. Holy shit. This band just built upon what they did with their demo, Surging Throng of Evil's Might. There's 9 songs on here. 3 of them are like interlude-y type things, which are all called Unholy Transformation, parts 1, 2, and 3. And then there's 6 regular full-length songs on here. And the best way to put it is how Brandon, Scourge of Vinyl, says it. Superstition is doing Morbid Angel better than what Morbid Angel is currently doing. And I agree. You know, Kingdoms Sustained, or whatever that record was called, and then the I record that came previous to that, this name that I don't actually even know off the top of my head, you know, this is better than both of those. And if you want something that sounds like Morbid Angel but isn't ripping them off and is better than what Morbid Angel is currently doing, Superstition is the way to go. And there's just so many riffs on this. You know, those first 2 songs, Highly Atoned Beasts of the Dark and Spiritual Sunderange, which were on, god damn it, which were on their promo that I talked about in my last collection update. Those 2 songs are 2 of my favorite songs. They got the best riffs. Definitely check out Superstition. If you love riffs, if you love death metal, if you love old school sounding death metal, Superstition is the way to go. Next up is Fever 333. This is Strength in Numbers, put out on Roadrunner Records. Roadrunner Records, there's a couple albums, this is being one. I think there's 1 or 2 more that came out on Roadrunner that are going to be on my list. They really surprised me with the bands that they've been putting out, with the band's records that they've been putting out, my bad. And Fever 333 was a band that I knew about for a little bit, but I kind of written off because people were comparing them to Rage Against the Machine and Linkin Park. And I've never really been fans of either of those bands, so I kind of wrote them off as well until I saw them live earlier this year. And holy shit, they killed it. You know, they got some elements of punk, some hardcore, even some thrashy elements. Not like traditional thrash from the 80s, but like some of like speed metal thrashy. And then there's some rapping, some hip hop on there. This record's all over the place, you know. Lyrically, it's kind of like socio-political. They talk about a lot of problems and that is currently happening in the world right now, which a lot of punk and hardcore bands do. So that's not really anything special, but it is a solid overall record. And if you do like any of the aforementioned bands that I had said, definitely give them a listen. I know this band has definitely been on the rise, so I can just see them getting bigger too. I can't wait to see what they do next. Next up is part 2 to a double album. The first part came out last year and made my year-end list. This is Sabrina Carpenter with Singular Act 2. In total, between the two albums, it is 17 songs and right around 50 minutes. And both the amount of songs and the length of the album is pretty long for a pop album. So that explains why it was cut into 2 parts. But this is basically just her continuing to build upon what Singular Part 1 was, as well as building off of what her previous record before this, Evolution, was. You know, she's taken back control of her songwriting and her lyricism, if that's even a word. And both parts of Singular have really shown her taking that back. Evolution, she wrote most of it by herself, but there was still a few songs that weren't written by her. And I feel like that kind of brought the record down. And so with her writing these songs, you know, it's bringing it up. And between the 2 parts, I honestly can't say which one is better, because they're both so good. Now, I wish it would have just been one album, but like I said, for traditional pop standards, especially what's on radio and what record labels consider to be a record, this would have been an extremely long record if it was all one. It was put out on Hollywood Records too, and they're not really known for putting out long records. Next up, we have the mini LP I was talking about. Triumvir Foul. This is Urine of Abomination. 4-song mini LP. Put out on $20 spin, along with Verasu Batlat, which I believe is the band's label, and Invictus Productions. This is some solid bestial war metal with a lot of noise elements thrown in. You know, there are times when I'm listening to this and it just feels like one giant song, and not in a bad way. I think the entire thing is like 16 minutes across all 4 songs, and it just sounds super good. If you like Titan Blood, if you like anything that this band has done previously, and you haven't for some reason checked this one out, do it, because this is one of those bands that I felt like has been leading the charge in like the Pacific Northwest. You know, that really becoming a prominent place for metal. And next up, Carnufex. This is World War X, put out on Nuclear Blast Records. Over the course of the last couple albums, Carnufex has been going more towards a blackened sound in their deathcore style, and I feel like it really accumulates on this one. The blackened elements aren't super overwhelming. They've toned down the blast beats in comparison to other albums. They're still there, but they are toned way down. They got 2 guest features on it, which Elisa White-Glues is one of them, which made her appearance made it the first Carnufex song to have clean singing. And then Angel Vivaldi did a guest solo on one, and he just took that track to a whole new level. I forget which one of their guitarists does the lead work, or if they both do it, but he just took that and made it miles better. There's only 9 songs on here, and I think this is probably, it's either the shortest or one of their shortest records. But I feel like they've been leading the charge with the black and deathcore movement, because bands like Lorna Shore and Shadow of Intent have also been taking taking blackened elements and putting it into their music, but I think Carnufex does it so much better than either of them. And lastly, we have Exhumed. This is horror. I forget what number album this is, but this is a return to form in a way. Over their last couple of records, they've gone in a much more death metal direction, and even on their previous album, Death Revenge, they went in sort of a melodic direction, and it was also a concept album as well. This one is just back to basics, straight up grinding death metal, more grind than death in my opinion. You know, you got songs like Utter Mutilation of Your Corpse, which is only 6 seconds. And then you got songs like Slaughter Maniac, Playing with Fear, that bring out the more death metal side of this record. And it's 15 songs, less than 30 minutes. You know, you compare that to Death Revenge, that was 10 songs and almost 50 minutes. So they really just decided to go back to a more grinding style, which I can't complain. You know, I loved Death Revenge because I'm a sucker for concept records, but horror is just a step above that, a step above their previous albums, and so goddamn good. And that is going to conclude this video. Like I said, links to everything will be down in the description below. Thank you for watching, commenting, subscribing, and all of that. And part 2 will be up in a couple days, and I will catch you then.